Let's pray together now. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, and beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, we humbly bow to you now. Bless our time together. Help us to feel thy divine presence shining within us, and help us to be clear channels for this light, this love and joy, this divine wisdom in the world. Om. Peace. Amen. Okay, dear friends. So I was thinking that today, as we start this series of living yoga, it might be helpful to touch upon some key concepts to provide a context for our satsangs together. So I'll do that and then talk about how we put that into practice. One of the first to begin with is yoga. What does yoga mean? The meaning of yoga is union. Union with our highest self, union with the divine. So the pathway of yoga, the practice of yoga, it is a pathway to this experience, this realization, which brings us to the goal of yoga. What is the goal? Well, goal is, the definition of yoga and the goal are the same, union. Also known as self-realization, realizing our divine self. Yogananda gave a beautiful definition for this. I thought I would read, again, as a way of providing a foundation and context for us. So Yogananda says that self-realization is the knowing in all parts of body, mind, and soul that we are now in the possession of the omnipresence of God, that we do not have to pray that it come to us, that we are not merely near it at all times, but that God's omnipresence is our omnipresence, that He is just as much a part of us now as He ever will be, and that all we have to do is improve our knowing. So that definition gives us the framework for our practice. It helps us to know that's where we're headed. And it's interesting because where we're headed is within our own self, within our highest truth. The journey of the spiritual path is not outward. That destination is not somewhere off in the distance. It's a destination of awakening. And all that we practice in yoga supports that awakening. So one of the metaphors that I find useful for my own practice is that of a map. And I like to think of myself just like looking at a map as, that little symbol that says you are here. So that tells me whenever I'm checking in with my practice, well, where am I? Where am I today? Where am I in this moment? And then also on the map is where am I headed? To self-realization. So as I'm practicing, then what I bring in, there's a path, okay, I'm going to take this path today, or this is the best tool that will support me in finding my way back to what Yogananda said in his definition. We're already there. So part of the practice is we're finding our way back to our own self and looking at, well, what's the best tool for me or the best practice for me today? Some of the foundational philosophical principles of yoga are what I look at each day. And I remember as I was reflecting for our talk today, I was thinking about a teacher of mine early on in my early 20s when I was really developing my spiritual life and trying to, figure out what I was doing and what's the best tool, what will help me in this moment, find calmness and find peace. And this teacher said to me, what you're doing right now is building a set of tools that you're putting in a toolbox, and they're unfamiliar to you. So first, you need to remember that you have a toolbox. And, I can be in the middle of my day at that time in particular, and I would forget that I had a toolbox. I'd be kind of stuck in something, some experience, some inward stressful moment, right? And so he was saying, so the first thing is to remember you have a toolbox. So then you remember that, and then you go to the toolbox and you start to look through it. And because all these tools are so new, you're not really sure, well, what will be the best tool? Right? Do I need a hammer? Do I need a saw? Is it like a nail? Like, what is it that's needed? And what he said to me, which has proven to be true, is that over time, you will remember that you have a toolbox. You'll be very familiar with all of those tools. When you open it, you'll have a sense immediately of which tool will serve you in this moment. And that has been very true. And that same metaphor has served me, and it continues to serve me in my practice. So here I am looking at my map for the day. Where am I? Right? I take a moment in my morning sadhana, at the end of sadhana, to check in and just calibrate my journey for the day. Well, where am I in this moment? How's my energy? Right? How uplifted do I feel in my consciousness? What's my sense of peace or ease? Part of what I'm looking at in that self-evaluation are what Yogananda calls the 8 aspects of the divine: light, love, joy, peace, calmness, wisdom, sound, and power. So when I'm checking in for the day and I'm looking at those qualities, and I don't necessarily look at all 8 of them, but I have an awareness of them, right? And I especially have an awareness if I feel outside of any of them. So if I feel agitated in my mind, if I feel agitated in my emotions, well, I'm certainly not experiencing calmness or peace. But the other thing that I know from practice is it will be very difficult for me to access wisdom. So if I'm about to make a decision, right before making a decision, it's important for me to check in and ask the question, how calm do I feel? How centered do I feel? How uplifted am I feeling in this moment? And that will give me an understanding of what next. So what tool, what practice will help me? One of the tools and practices I use, I'm sure I use it daily, are affirmations. So this last week, I've been practicing the affirmation of acceptance, which I will read and share with you. And I'm smiling broadly because today in particular has been a day that I'm so grateful I've been working with that affirmation, because there it was, right? So let me read that now. This comes from Affirmations for Self-Healing from Swami Kriyananda, and we read these each week as part of our Sunday service. So this is on acceptance. I accept with calm impartiality whatever comes my way. Free in my heart, I am not conditioned by any outward circumstance. I accept with calm impartiality whatever comes my way. Free in my heart, I am not conditioned by any outward circumstance. This affirmation speaks to what the practice of yoga supports us in realizing: the opportunity to find our way back to calmness or maintain calmness, one of these 8 aspects of the divine, in the middle of our day. So this tool of affirmation, if you're not sure, right? If your toolbox, you're building it now and you're figuring out for yourself what would be helpful, what might serve you in this moment, I would start with affirmation. It is so powerful, and I know those of you who've been attending the Ananda Yoga classes are very familiar, and it's one of the aspects of Ananda Yoga that's very unique. And many new students to Ananda Yoga highlight that the after class, they'll talk about the affirmations, the amazing affirmations. Swamiji meditated very deeply with every pose, listening for the flow of energy and the shift of consciousness that the pose offers us. And then he wrote out beautiful affirmations to accompany those poses. So when we're practicing the physical postures, we can bring the mind into our practice and help ourselves go with the direction of energy and support our consciousness in being lifted and uplifted. So this book is a beautiful book of affirmations. You can find it through Crystal Clarity. The affirmations for the yoga postures, I believe you can find them online by searching Ananda Yoga. So Ananda Yoga affirmations, I'm pretty sure, but we can make sure that you get them if you're needing them. Even if you're not practicing them physically, they're so beautiful. And what I find is through the practice of affirmation, over time, the affirmation comes to me. This morning, we were filming and there were some technical difficulties, and the affirmation came back to me, right? Like, well, there it is. With I accept with calm impartiality whatever comes my way, free in my heart. I am not conditioned by any outward circumstance. There's a beautiful story that it's spoken of a lot in our Ananda world because it touches upon, again, the benefits of our practice. And one of our ministers was giving a class in India, and he was asked what powers he had attained from all his many years of practicing yoga. And at first, he was surprised and said, well, I haven't attained any powers. Because the practice of Ananda Yoga is we're not looking for external powers, and that's kind of the most obvious. So he was thinking, well, gee, I don't have any of those external powers. But something within him, and I'm guessing divine intuition, had him reflect a little more deeply and be able to say to his students, I have attained a power through the practice of Ananda Yoga. And that power is the capacity to choose happiness at any moment. And that is a very great power. So this practice of the affirmations, when we're saying them, sometimes we don't feel them. I'm saying it and, some part of me is feeling like, well, that doesn't really feel true. As long as I feel willing and able and open to moving in that direction, then it's very useful for me to practice and say and repeat the affirmation until it does feel true. They have great power. Swamiji wrote these affirmations. He said them many times. We've all been saying them for many years now. So there's great power in those words. When you're looking for an affirmation, if it feels too far ahead for you, that really what happens is you start to say it and you experience strong resistance to what you're trying to say. It's an indication that that's not a good choice for you. So back to that map metaphor, where am I? Where am I headed? If I need to start where I am, I need to be honest with myself and be willing to say, well, that one feels too far ahead of me. Let me see if I can find another one. It's always been my experience that I can, right? So you can try it. It's okay to stretch yourself a little bit. I would say most of the affirmations are a stretch for me, right? I'm challenging myself to grow. I'm challenging myself to take one more step toward awakening. So I want to feel a little challenged, which is similar to our practice of the postures. You want to feel that you are dynamically engaged with your practice. You want to feel that it has your full attention, right? You're not doing something else. And you also want to feel that it's reasonable and realistic for where you are in this moment. We have some exercises that we practice called super conscious living exercises, which are a really wonderful way of getting the energy up. And I think in some previous classes that we have through the Sangha, I recall Keshava leading these. It could have been Sai Ganesh as well. But it's extraordinary that these simple practices awaken energy so strongly. The first time that you practice them, what my observance is as a teacher, is as for adults, they can feel very silly. They can feel like, what am I doing? Why are we doing this? And there can be self-consciousness. But as the teacher's leading them with enthusiasm, you get swept up in it. And that's been my experience actually both with Keshava and Tandava teaching these. I mean, I love these practices, but I've been in classes where they teach them, and their enthusiasm, their commitment, their knowing of the power of them grabs me, right? And that speaks to something else, which is a tool of satsang, good company. When we're with others who are practicing yoga, who believe in it, who've experienced the power of this practice, it helps us get on board with it. It's difficult to practice when you're the only one. It is, right? And if you're around others who their energy isn't lifted, it's not inspired, they're not feeling anywhere close to those 8 aspects, and you're trying to get there, finding a way, and these incredible classes that are being offered through the Sangha, these satsangs, finding a way to tune into them. There's an intimacy that I experience, and I watch a lot of them. And when I'm not able to watch them, I listen to them later. I was doing that last night, listening to some of Shanti's talks, just put in my earbuds and relaxing to them. And even though I wasn't watching it, it's like, this is what I want to take into my consciousness. And so knowing, what am I doing right before going to bed? What am I doing right when I get up? One of the practices that Yogananda encouraged is at the end of the day to release the day. Right? And one of our practices with introspection is to look at the day, to evaluate how well did it go. And that question has to do with how closely aligned did I feel to the 8 aspects of God? How accessible did those qualities feel to me? And again, I'm not always looking at every one. If I feel close to anyone, that is a success for my day. And the truth is, if I'm close to anyone, then I'm close to all of them. They're divine qualities. That means I'm touching, I'm connected, I'm feeling aligned with God. So these practices, some of the tools that I'm sharing, super conscious living exercises, again, I think you can find them online, but we have one of the classes being offered are tools for super consciousness, and that's where I think I saw it. So I would say go and look for that, right? All of these are recorded, you can find them. And then you aren't practicing by yourself, right? You have a friend, a divine friend that you're practicing with. Yogananda said, second to a guru, so to having a master in our lives that is showing us the way, which is the highest blessing to have that. Second to that is divine friendship, is satsang. So another very, very powerful tool. Affirmations, yes. Superconscious living exercises, yes, that gets the energy up. And divine friendship community, making sure that you feel you are not walking your path alone. That helps us stay faithful. It helps us stay hopeful. It helps us stay inspired. One of the things that Swamiji said is if you're wondering, right, what channel, what vibration are you aligned with, the quality, the feeling of hope, of inspiration, of possibility, that's a reflection of light. That's a reflection of divine light. So if you're ever feeling discouraged, if you're ever feeling a sense of isolation, of it's all too hard, that would be in the yoga practice an indication that I've somehow lost my attunement. Attunement we talk a lot about. Yogananda described it like tuning into a radio station. So what I found with the practice of attunement, and I really relate to that one. There's a phrase of Yogananda's in his teaching, is thoughts are universally rooted, not individually rooted. So thoughts are not individually rooted, but universally rooted. And this practice of attunement is that if whatever thoughts I'm having are a reflection of the vibration I've aligned my consciousness with. They're not my thoughts. They seem like my thoughts because they sound like me, but they're not me. Right? So in the teaching of yoga, we are not our thoughts. We are not our body. We are a divine soul, a perfect reflection of God. So when my thoughts are expanded, uplifted, inspired, joyful, well, I know I'm attuned to God. I know I'm attuned to light. I'm attuned to one of those 8 aspects. If I feel discouraged, if I feel agitated, if I feel lost and alone, as I was saying, somehow the channel got tuned into the vibration that's leading me away from self-realization. So without criticism or self-judgment, or wondering, well, what happened? Why did that happen? What I find, and this is another example, if I'm in the mud, it's better to get out of the mud than try and wonder, how did I get into the mud? It happens. There's lots of reasons for it. If it's useful, that once you're out and firmly on solid ground, you can ask that question and explore it. It might be helpful, but maybe it was the company I was keeping. Maybe it was what I was reading. Maybe it was something I ate. Actually, these are part of the daily practice of yoga, of asking, I evaluate. So at the end of the day, when I'm giving my day back to God, and I'm looking at the day, and there's a stanza in the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita at the very beginning, where the blind king asks the question, what did they? And that's an indication of the practice of introspection. So what we're doing at the end of the day is evaluating, how did the battle go, the spiritual battle? Did I stay attuned? Right? If I find at the end of the day that there were a lot of skirmishes that I didn't feel like I succeeded at, then I hold that information with compassion and jnana yoga, which is calm and partiality, that says, okay, very well, it was a difficult day. It was difficult for me to stay attuned. It was difficult for me to feel in alignment. That is information. And I ask myself, what tools might be helpful? What more support might I bring into my life to help me tomorrow? And I give that day to God. And the next morning when I awake, I remember yesterday was hard. So let me go into my toolbox, evaluate, where am I today? And how can I use the tools and practices of yoga to help me awaken? I hope this was helpful for you today. It's very, very good to be with you. Sending you many blessings, much light